Good evening. Councilmember Toby Gilley has our prayer this evening, and our pledge will be led by a Troop 398 from St. Mark's United Methodist Church, Boy Scout, Ross Hopkins. So, Mr. Gilley, if you'll start us off.
Thank you. Would you bow with me, please? Dear God, our most loving Heavenly Father, we thank you so very much for this wonderful day that you've given us in this great community in which you provided us to live, raise a family, and to work and play. Father, tonight, as we come together as a council to make decisions for this city, give us your wisdom and your guidance. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Master Hopkins.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to Murfreesboro City Council, August 16th, 2012. We certainly appreciate the Hopkins family representation tonight. Janie, Ross's mom, is here, and Ross is working on a communications merit badge, and we certainly appreciate his hard work in scouting and his persistence in trying to achieve greater heights there, and also especially appreciate St. Mark's United Methodist Church for their support of Troop 398. So we're happy you're here. We appreciate you being here, and as always, we welcome anyone who'd like to come visit our city council, certainly when they're in a good mood and happy. But so at this time, are there any other announcements that need to be made?
I didn't do it. It's not me, Doug.
I know. Okay, payback.
Okay.
I learned. You haven't learned.
It wasn't you.
Any other announcements, Mr. Young?
No, sir.
All right, you have your consent agenda before you if you've had an opportunity to review the consent agenda and turn off all electronic equipment, or at least put it on vibrate. If you've looked at your consent agenda, are there any questions regarding any of those items, or is there a motion that we accept the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gilley. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gales-Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. This time you have also before you the minutes of the August 2nd, 2012 regular meeting. Are there any additions or deletions or corrections that need to be made to those minutes of that regular meeting, August the 2nd? If not, is there a motion we accept?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gilley. Mr. Washington, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gales-Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. All right, you have now on third reading the following. Please consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to rezone an area along South Church Street to Highway Commercial CH District.
Move for passage on third and final reading.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gales-Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. Also on third and final reading, consider for passage an ordinance to rezone an area located east of Memorial Boulevard to Highway Commercial CH District.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gales-Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. And this time we'll consider recommendations of the Planning Director. Consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to amend Appendix A zoning, Section 24 Overlay District Regulations, and to consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to zone an area along Joe B. Jackson Parkway as a planned signage overlay PSO district. Good evening, Mr. Adelot.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg, members of the council. The Amazon Fulfillment Center along Joe B. Jackson Parkway is moving towards completion. Application is made been made for sign permits, and it has been determined that some of these signage is not allowed under the sign ordinance, under the generally applicable signs allowed in the HI heavy industrial zone. Because of the scale of this development and the types of signs that are being proposed, staff believes that the property and the development is an excellent candidate for zone as a PSO, planned sign overlay. However, the PSO, planned sign overlay district, is not eligible in the HI and LI zones. The Planning and Building Code staff believe it is appropriate to allow the PSO in large industrial sites and has agreed to initiate an amendment to the zone ordinance to allow the PSO in these districts. The owners have made application for PSO for this property, and what we're going to do is ask that the council schedule public hearings on these two matters, and that these be probably on September 27th. What this will allow is a time for us to advertise, and then for us to have it before the Planning Commission, for the Planning Commission to study, and for it to make a recommendation to you on both matters. I would note that the Planning Commission has already scheduled a public hearing for September 5th, so it's moving forward with this. The fiscal impact, well, we have the application fee that's been paid that covers our out-of-pocket costs for the advertisements and such. That's been paid and collected. But this is sort of an economic development, and it's hard to quantify, but we believe it will be substantial over time. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
All right. Any questions, Mr. Adelite? So do we want to consider on first reading and then set the public hearing? All right, so you have for passage on first reading this ordinance to amend Appendix A zoning, Section 24, to allow in the heavy industrial, is that correct?
And light industrial both.
And light industrial both, a planned signage overlay. Are there any questions regarding that ordinance on first reading?
Mayor, I move for passage on first reading.
All right.
Second.
Mr. McFarland?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding that?
Mr. Adelite,
excuse me, Mr. McFarland.
I was just going to say, one of the reasons when you have a site that's this large, I guess, and especially since there will be trucks coming in and out, they're looking for a better way to direct their traffic on site.
Absolutely. This is about directional signage so that the trucks that are coming and going from the docks will know where to go, and so that the employees who are coming and going and new hires, people who are coming to the facility to visit, will have some ability to be directed. Also, the building is, it's massive. You've probably seen the photographs. You may have driven by it. And I'm going to use an analogy like I did yesterday at the Planning Commission. The sign that the sign ordinance would allow is kind of like the little logo on the television screen, the brand. It's so small you can't hardly read it. But they need to have a bigger one because that building sits quite a distance off of Joe B. Jackson Parkway. And the size of that building is just dwarfs the signage that's permitted. So we're looking at something that'd be a little bit larger. And it's by no means going to look huge. It will look small by comparison to the building, but it exceeds what's allowed under the sign ordinance. So the PSO will allow for the directional signage. It will also allow for the larger sign on the face of the building.
All right, you have this motion and second on first reading.
Mayor,
yes, Mr. Smotherman.
I was out by there this morning riding and looking to see how progress the project was coming along and trying to understand what these signs were taking place. Are what we're talking about, is that comparable to what we see at the Nissan plant?
Something like that, yes, sir.
Because, I mean, it's mostly directional signage.
It is directional signage. This is not even advertising signage. Right. Although they may have a logo of the Amazon facility on it, quite appropriate so people know that they're on the right campus.
Right.
Any other questions, comments? If not, please call the roll on first reading.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to zone an area along Joe B. Jackson Parkway as a planned signage overlay PSO district. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Motion second. Any questions? Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. And then, Ms. McGannon, would you like to suggest a date for a public hearing?
I concur with Mr. Adelot, but September 27th would be appropriate.
Okay, I will not be available that day, but I don't want that to delay the council's deliberations. I'm just making a note of that. All right, is there a motion, September 27th?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adelot. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the city recorder to consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to amend ordinance which adopts the fiscal year 2012-2013 budget by amending page 1 of Exhibit A to the said ordinance. Ms. Wright.
Mayor Bragg, it was discovered when we were completing paperwork for the state that we had combined a couple of lines that needed to be separated for formatting purposes. Under our revenue lines, we've combined reimbursements from other funds and transfers in, and the state, for the forms we have to do for them, needs those to be separated. And under debt service, we had combined transfers out and other costs. Transfers out is really more of a paperwork item. It's the school debt. We actually pay that, but for our CAFR, we have to show that separately. So there's no changes to any of our numbers or any of our totals, any of our fund balance. It's all formatting. And I recommend you let us get that corrected by passing this ordinance.
All right. So this would amend the first ordinance. Anyway, any questions, Ms. Wright, regarding this recommendation? If not, is there a motion?
Move for passage on first read.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the city manager with regards to the proposed 2012-2016 capital improvement plan. Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg, members of City Council. We present to you the city's capital improvement plan. This was the subject of a July workshop where we went over the projects individually. So this evening I'll just give you a very brief overview of the CIP and then be glad to answer any questions. The CIP totals $258 million over a 5-year period and includes 92 projects. We use the CIP as a planning tool. It identifies new facilities, replacement and upgrades of existing city facilities, and equipment replacement. And this is a process that we go through annually where we identify projects that need to be completed. It is year one of the CIP that we look to actually borrow money for. The balance of the projects in years 2 to 5 are just that. They are planning for the future. However, there is no financial commitment at this point in time. The capital projects for 2012 total almost $46 million. The majority of this are for roads, public safety, recreation, and education. That is the bulk of the projects that are included. As you know, we have anchored your city budget around the goals that are established by the City Council. So some of the projects for our safe and livable neighborhood initiatives include public safety communications, a training facility for the Fire and Rescue Department and the Police Department. Now, in the capital improvement plan that we gave you in July, we had 2 individual projects, but we had indicated at that point in time we wanted to develop those jointly on the campus out at the Coleman Farm. What we've done in the document now is to keep the project listed in the Fire and Rescue Department, the project description, the project justification, because the Fire Department has expressed a need for a training facility, and we want to recommend that to you. However, what we've done is take the dollars that were located in the Fire CIP and simply move those over to the Police Department. It will be developed as one joint campus. So when we look at expenses for utilities and construction and parking lots, we'll have that all in one bucket. However, each will have their own facility, just as we had recommended to you in July. I did want to point that out to you, that the money was moved, but the project still remains. In fact, this year we're just looking at doing the engineering for that. We've also got money in the neighborhoods for our North Manny Avenue improvements. This continues the project that's been very successful on South Manny, and then police and fire and rescue vehicles and equipment. There's a number of economic development initiatives, including the Veterans Parkway 2A and 2B, a downtown revitalization and engineering for Bradyville Pike, And we've got a number of improvements at our parks, Old Fort Park, Barfield Crescent, Canonsburg, Sportscom. We've shared with you information about a proposed park in western Murfreesboro. This year we included the money for the engineering and design. There's land for a new city elementary school in the Blackman area, new senior center bus, replacement of solid waste automated side loaders, replacement of rover buses, and a first tee golf program. In my staff report to you, I also shared with you the fact that the $46 million proposed bond issue that represents year one of the city's capital improvement plan has already been accommodated for in your annual budget. And then we've also shared information with you that this proposed amount of debt certainly is within all of our financial policies. You'll recall 3 years ago the City Council established financial performance measures, and that becomes a good guidepost for us to compare where we're at in a number of different financial areas, including debt. And even with this $46 million bond issue, you are well within all of the measures that you set. We're not hitting any of the warning levels, so we wanted to make sure we shared that with the community, that we do certainly take that very seriously, study on it hard, but these are projects we believe help move our community forward. And as a planning tool for you, Mayor and Council, we would recommend the CIP to you. After we get your review and input on this planning tool, we would then return to you in the not-too-distant future with a recommendation on a borrowing instrument. Following the borrowing of the money, then each of these individual projects listed in year one would then be returned to you as necessary for your approval at an individual expenditure level. So there's a progression here. This evening we're talking about the 5-year vision and establishing some priorities for year one. We'll come back to you later with a specific financing plan. Typically, the cities use the Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund. They've been an excellent source and low-cost place to borrow the money. And then finally, as you see on your agendas regularly, there's recommendations from city staff to purchase vehicles, equipment right away, or a capital project that requires your specific approval. So with that introduction, Mayor, I'd be certainly glad to answer any questions you have on any of those projects. And we have some of our department heads here if it's necessary for their feedback and their input.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. And I see Director of our schools, city schools, Linda Gilbert is here. Dr. Gilbert, glad to have you with us. Let's see, and the Vice Chair of the Williamson County School Board, is that right? Is it special school district or the Williamson County School Board is here? Gary, nice to have you with us too. Certainly gives us a lot of help having an employee who works with the elected board too. I guess, are they elected or appointed? Very good. So you know what it's like to get elected, don't you? All right. Members, you have heard this, and I think Mr. Lyons has done an outstanding job and probably one of the best outlays of our capital outlay or capital improvement plans. And certainly you can see what the borrowing projected for this first year, every individual item. And I think in our CIP plan, which I have a copy here with us, went through each one of those individually and gave us kind of a detailed information sheet on each item, and I think that's quite a feat, and thank you for doing that. I know it takes a lot of staff time and a lot of work to put that together, so please pass along my thanks, and I'm sure the rest of the council for the work of your department and heads in preparing that document. So I open up the floor. Anyone has questions or would like to make comments regarding at least the first year, and certainly any other years if you wish to, but the first year is probably something that we consider right now.
Could we, since we are looking at proposing approximately a 45,600,000 something for the first year, can we look at it by items?
Certainly.
Departments?
Certainly. Any particular item that you would like to look at first?
We can just go down if you don't mind. I think it starts on our page.
Okay, administration. Year one projects, administration.
77. Page 77.
Yeah, page 77. ADA, it looks like a 5-year, $100,000 expenditure. and then redoing the City Hall roof for $160,500. Any questions or comments regarding those two items? If not engineering, we have acquisition of properties, downtown revitalization, the Maple Street Alley reconstruction, and North Manny Avenue, all to a total of $881,000. Any comments to those engineering items?
And again, if we approve these, we're not approving the project, we're approving the acquisition of funds if the project were approved. Is that correct? Or are we approving the project?
I guess, Mr. Smotherman, I think the way we've tried to approach this in the past is staff wants to make sure we're staying close to the council as we move these projects forward. Many of these take a good amount of research, planning, and design, so that we want to build consensus at key stops along the way. And this is the planning stop and a very key stop, so that we get a sense that you think this project is something you want to see move forward. That is not to say that if you include a project in the CIP that it comes back to you for approval at a specific level, that you still have the ability to approve or disapprove it. However, when we hear at the CIP adoption step that it's included in the CIP, and then we start putting together our financing package, that financing package is going to include sufficient funds for the projects you've said you think we're in good shape. We'll then borrow the money, and staff will get to work with doing what we need to do. For a vehicle purchase, it's going to mean we're going to bid it out, take bids, recommend the low bidder, and stand at the podium and make that recommendation to you. That's not to say if you get to that point in time and feel that that's not a project you want to support, you still have the ability to say, we're not going to approve it, and that money's not spent for that purpose. So it is a consensus-building process, Mr. Smotherman.
Thank you. That explains some of my question. I'm all for radios for firefighters and police officers, improving senior citizens' facilities, schools for children, good jobs, good roads. I mean, we're all for those things. A safer city, nobody's going to argue. But I do have a problem with this increasing the debt during a recessionary economy, and we're looking at $46 million worth of increase here. I just see, I talk to people on a daily basis that are struggling with high electric bills, and the city's saying we need a new golf course, and they've got high water bills, and they're proposing longer greenways, and the high cost of raising children, and we want to build new swimming pools for 3 months out of the year. It just seems like we're spending a whole lot of money. I mean, and I'm trying to justify, in my mind, why we're doing this. I mean, because and I may be the only one who thinks we're still in a recession, but I feel that it would be irresponsible of us to go aggressively forward on these without. I know we're saying we need to fund them, but to go beyond that and go out and start spending money, say, on engineering fees and stuff like that, and bidding them out without coming back to the council and saying, this is what we're planning on doing, would be either a waste of your time or unfair to the person who's on the recipient end of bidding the contract with no chance of getting it. So, having said that, I mean, I guess I don't have any problem with what we've got on here so far, but further down, I guess I'm going to have concerns.
May I ask a question? So we are saying that we want to borrow this $45 million plus, go in and borrow it, and then let's say, and I'm just picking this because it's on the top line here, City Hall roof, and I know we need one, I'm not kicking that, this is just an example. So we've already gone out and we borrowed this $45 million plus, and then we come and say it's time now for the City Hall roof. And if we say, okay, we don't need that right now, but we've gone on and borrowed the money. So that's why I kind of wanted to go down individually Because if we borrow the money, then when you come to us to pay for this, and then we turn it down, seems like we're taking the cart before the horse with our taxpayers' money and with my tax dollars. So why would we borrow this money and we may not do some of these projects?
And I think, let me respond to two pieces to that, Ms. Harris. I think that's the reason why we bring the CIP to you. We're looking for direction from you. If there's projects in here that the majority council don't support, we'd rather hear that now and delete it from the CIP. As you know, years 2 to 5, those are our best guess about what will happen. Now, theoretically speaking, the year 2 projects next year slide to year 1. But that doesn't mean we just package it up and send it to you. We're going to revisit every one of those projects to see if priorities have changed, finances have changed, whether we are in a financial position to afford what we've got. So you've got the ability to add and delete any of these projects. But it takes, for instance, on the roof, that'll require an architect. It'll require bid specifications. And if that's not something, that, by way of your example, that we want to do right now, then that's probably a good time for us to know that, so we don't invest the staff time and incur any cost. Now, the second piece to that, and this is your planning document. This was our staff's recommendation to you, what we think we need to do this year. But we certainly, just like the annual budget, we look to you for direction, and it'll be your document. And then once you approve it, then staff will get hard at work to make these projects move forward. The primary, as I mentioned, we primarily have used the Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund, and the funding instrument we've used almost exclusively has functioned like a line of credit. And in this case, there'll be some borrowing costs, so let's round off and say it's approximately $46 million. If we utilize that line of credit process that they have as opposed to a bond issue, that line of credit means that is available for us to use, and as bills and projects move forward and Ms. Wright needs to make a recommendation for payment, we'll draw down off of that $46 million. So we don't get all $46 million on day one. We don't begin paying interest on $46 million on day one. We only begin to accrue interest as we draw down that money, and it typically takes 2 to 3 years for us to draw down the full amount. So for those projects that may sit 6 months or 9 months to come to you, we've not borrowed the money yet. It's available to us. We can draw it down from that line of credit. So that's been one of the advantages of that TML bond fund, has been we can use it as a line of credit, and that helps us on our interest costs. At the end of the day, the way with our 15-year amortization schedule, we pay 87% of our debt back in 10 years. The city very aggressively pays back its debt. And much like when you go to borrow money for your home, your bank may show you what your mortgage payment would be for a 30-year note versus a 15-year note. And that 15-year note, the payment's a good amount more. However, it saves in substantial interest cost savings. And we pay our debt back over 15 years. So we have been very aggressive, and that has helped us in a growing community make sure that these projects get paid back quickly, because we know we're going to have more needs for roads and schools. So being very aggressive for a number of years, and that's a credit to this council, that we've been able to continue to move projects forward and manage our debt very successfully.
Also, if we have short-term assets, for instance, police cars or items that don't last 15 years, we pay those off on a quicker schedule, on a depreciated schedule. It's not like buying a house on a 30-year note that's got a refrigerator in it. In year 29, you're still paying for that first refrigerator you had in your house that you had a 30-year note on. So we don't do that. We pay those items off at the depreciated rate. So that also helps us reduce our costs.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
Mr. Lyons, would you tell me about the timing of the borrowing now? How is the market? How is the...
Right now, interest rates are at historic lows, and we had originally planned on a fall borrowing. However, with interest rates being very low right now, we're going to look to move that forward and to try to lock in a very low interest rate. Again, that will save the city some money, so we may move that forward. That's what I had mentioned to you in July. It's the reason why I'm back before you here in August, because I want to see if we can't take advantage of the low interest rates.
Mr. McFarland.
Mr. Lyons, do you know offhand how much debt we're retiring this next year?
In your budget in the debt service fund, you've got a total expenditure of $29.8 million.
Okay.
You've got a 2009 TML refunding bond that you'll pay just under $8 million this year. Our loans, our principal totals over $15 million. And then you've got interest totaling $6.4 million.
Okay, but taking interest out, what's that total?
The principal?
23 million,
Okay.
8 and 15.
So even though, the one thing that I really try to look at when we do these borrowings is to see how much that we're paying off in the year and the same year. And even though that if we did say, look, we are going to borrow $46 million, then it may take 3 years to because I know the last bond issuance we did was 60 some odd million, or was that right, 60 or 70?
The last one we did was $44 million, but we'd had a number of years where we were north of $65 million.
Okay. But I guess what my point is, if it's taking us 3 years to pay off, or 3 years to go through the bond issuance, and we're averaging, 20 some odd million a year, we're looking at that, we're paying it off quicker than we're actually borrowing the money.
And we didn't borrow money last year. We tried to hold a tight line to it, and we're able to get this, the $44 million. We waited a year. We did not borrow money last year. We made it work.
Mr. Gilly had a question or a comment.
Rob, if I understand things correctly, when we're talking about treating this as a line of credit, we actually are getting approved for the amount at a certain interest rate. But as you bring projects that are on the CIP back to us throughout the year, if we feel that things have changed and we don't want to utilize that project or go forward with that, then that's money of that $45 million we actually just don't ever borrow.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? And so we would end up not, let's say there's a $2 million project in there that 6 months from now when you bring it to us, we decide that's something we just don't feel the economy supports us doing. While we're approved for that much money, in essence, the overall borrowing would be, if we did every other project, would be $43 million instead of $45. So it's not like we get the money and then have to find something to do with it. We simply just would not ever borrow the money. We're just approved for it. Is that a...
Yes, sir. Once you approve the planning document, you absolutely have the right to not move any of these projects forward, later in the day. Staff would have spent time on them, but if that's what your decision is, that's what your decision is.
And before each project, before money is spent on those projects, you would come back to us saying, here's what we're wanting to spend and how we're going to spend it on this project, and giving us the opportunity to say whether we still want to do that project or not.
And that's why I use that consensus building description of this process. We want to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. You're going to have the ability to specifically review them later, but we want to make sure we're heading in the right direction. If there's some of these that you want to add, delete, or defer a year or two, we want to take that direction, so we've got our marching orders.
Okay.
And I guess a good example would be that when I was on the Parks and Recreation Commission, we've heard for several, since I've been on council, we've heard about having a recreation opportunity on the west side of town that we presently do not have. There's not really anything that we have that's west of 24 besides, Cason Lane Elementary and Scales Elementary, and we have elementary fields and things like that, but that's not considered a recreational park. So what we had talked about at the time on Parks and Recreation was that we would look at having an RFP to see what land would be out there in some of the undeveloped areas. So although that we are looking, for a significant outlay in 2013 for a park, the economy may not change, or there may be significant things that happen in the economy that we may say we're not going to proceed with that. So even though that we've got the $720,000 that's in the line item, to do engineering and look for land, we may not, when you bring that 6 months from now, we may say, look, we just don't need to do that right now.
And Mr. McFarland, you raised a good question, and I want to talk to you a little bit about part of the approach that we take on break points in these projects. Many projects have an engineering component, a land or right-of-way component, and then a construction component. And in the CIP, or for the larger projects, if there's a break in funding where it's not all in 1 year, we'll make a break in one of those 3 categories, so we've got a natural stopping point. The design is done, but we hadn't gone to acquire the right-of-way yet. Or we've done the design and the right-of-way, but want to wait on the construction. So we make sure that there's a logical break point, that if conditions change and the council wants to call a timeout, we're not stuck where we have only half the money.
And the only reason I say that is I know of several instances that we've had over the last couple of years where we have decided we were going to wait on a project, and actually, because of economies of scale, that we may have budgeted $10 million for a road project, as an example, and the construction bids came in at $7.5 million. So, there may be times that we, as a council, say, let's hold off and see what happens price-wise, or a bid may come in and we're like, look, that's way too expensive. We can't do that right now. So it really is a moving document to see where our budgets may come in and out. So
it's these, I'm sorry, excuse me.
And I guess it could work the other way of what Shane's saying. If we go ahead and approve the money and we've still got the project on hold, but let's say some land comes available and it's very inexpensive, then we would be in a better position because we would already have access to the money. Is that the way?
Yep.
We've got to make sure we stay, the resolutions prepared by the legal department have categories, and we need to make sure we're staying consistent with an expenditure, that it was an approved use. We can't go use the bond issue for a purpose that wasn't otherwise blessed initially.
Right. But just using the Western Park for example, if land were to become available over there in that area at a reduced rate, let's say somebody's planning a construction project and says, no, we're not going to use it for this, and all of a sudden a large mass of land were to become available, then we would still be better off if we had the money in the budget, even if we didn't think we were going to do it without that situation taking place.
Yes, sir.
So all of these projects have come to us individually?
And you have to approve bids after their bids are taken for most of them, too.
And the things that we have in the first year, the various departments, do they think that we're going to do it?
Yes. You mentioned the Western Park. I told somebody we were going to build or look at building a Western Park, and they said, "You mean cowboys and all that stuff?" So it may be that we need to talk about a park in the west of Murfreesboro, or in West Murfreesboro instead of a Western Park. We've had a Bible park, and now we're going to have a Western Park, so I'm not sure how but I don't want anything getting mixed up there.
Sure.
So let's then look, we've looked at admin and engineering. We have the fire and rescue total, which is $5.2 million, which is a replacement of several pieces of equipment, primarily. Then the fuel canopy and parking lot at Fleet Service. Any questions there? I skipped over fire. Any questions with fire and rescue? All right, then on golf, we have the first tee course at $107,500. Anything there? Any questions?
Okay, I'll step up and do it.
Step up. Step up.
And I'm not against golf. Don't misconstrue this. But I personally think that when we are developing golf courses, we are developing something that is in direct competition with the private sector. Let's say Indian Hills, the Champions Run, and I really hate to see people who may be struggling. I don't know if they are or not. They may be doing wonderful. But I hate to see the city going competition business with somebody who already has something. And this particular project would be one that will not be revenue neutral, I don't think. I mean, traditionally, our golf course has been, but that's a different situation than this little training course that we're
This
talking
is
about.
a little bit different situation. If it's all right with the council, I'd like to ask Mr. Wilkins. He's got a drawing and an explanation, because this is a little different than our typical golf course.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity. This is a little different than, I guess, the way you spoke of it as it being in competition. This is, in my opinion, probably not anything that anybody else would ever develop because of what we're talking about doing and where we're talking about doing it. It is on an old demolition landfill that the city currently owns over between Stones River and Lytle Creek, just behind the golf course. Right now, it's just grown up with weeds and stuff, and it's probably been, I think, capped for upwards of 20 years and just sitting there with nothing. We're looking at an improvement not only to a piece of property that the city owns. They can't sell it or get rid of it or build anything on it. Can't be anything really done to it other than something to develop something like this. What we're looking at with this is a place where we have, over the years, and we've been charged with being able to offer golf opportunities to everyone, including people that maybe couldn't afford to play. We've introduced golf to, on several occasions, where people couldn't afford to come back and play or have the opportunity. This is something that we are looking at developing with this money that we're asking for from the city. Is just a portion of what it would take to develop this. I've already got a commitment from a foundation for $150,000 to go towards it because it's called Links Across America. It's introducing kids to golf, trying to fill in a gap of where, trying to grow the game and a gap there with the generational gap that we're looking at now, where golf is struggling in different places. It would be a place that we could instruct. We've spoken with the First Tee out of Nashville, where they would be able to come up and use and instruct and do things for kids. Also spoken with a tournament that we hold each year with the Tennessee School for the Blind. They have a golf team and a band and different things that they would be interested in coming up and using the facility. Some others had a meeting just last month with Kappa Alpha Psi, that's an alumni fraternity that is encouraging and mentoring to young men that are in junior and seniors in high school going on to college, where they have service projects, community service type projects, where we would hopefully be working with them as far as maintaining the facility, using it as career opportunities. This is not what I would call a 6-hole golf course. It is a par 3 learning type teaching facility, but I'm looking at it way more as a tool to be able to involve youth, adults, seniors, anyone, using it as a tool for mentoring youth, making our neighborhoods more safe and livable, the area that and the type kids that would be able to use it. Also, with the push that we have behind it and being able to monitor and maintain it, I don't believe it's going to be of a cost to the city to maintain it for the future because of the private funding that we will have for it. It is an expense up front, but I believe it's beautifying a piece of property that the city really can't do anything else with. It's going to be offering an opportunity to a lot of different folks that would not ever probably have the opportunity to be introduced to the game. And at the same time, the mentoring type opportunities, the programs that we're hopefully going to introduce through this is going to be way more used as a tool to do these types of programs more than a competition of a golf course towards anything else. This is not something a private sector would invest in as far as a money-making type project.
Because it's not going to make money.
No, but it's not outside of this first investment.
After the $3 million, it'll be...
No. We're talking about $100,000 investment.
The $3 million is for something down the road.
$3 million is for later down the road.
2014 is
something-
completely different. It's not, it's part of the Western Murfreesboro Park.
So the $3 million here that's listed for 2014,
Separate
It's
project.
not part of this project.
it's not part of what it says it is here, is the golf course and teaching facility. It's not part of that.
It's a different.
That's a full teaching, learning facility that we're talking about. This is just
Okay.
the single, this project, if we just went out and did it, you're probably looking at $350,000, $400,000 to do it because of the funding, the grants that we'll be able to get, the 100 that we're talking about from the city.
Well, before you go too far, it looks a lot more attractive now that it's $3 million cheaper for me. But in all seriousness, let me ask this. Why can't we do these same teaching operations at the VA? What prevents us from doing it there?
Well, the setup, the way the VA is set up too, where we hope to try to make it a zero-based balance budget also. The setup for the way that's designed and the practice facility, there's nowhere to be able to do anything like that. We have one little area right out front that's 3 or 4 acres that sits right beside 231 as far as a place that some people do practice and hit a few little short shots, but it's just not set up to do that and work cohesively with the public being able to play it at the same time and being able to shut it down. This is something that we'd be able to shut down as far as being able to go over and do and teach. And when we're not doing that, or we don't have it reserved for somebody that's using it for a program like that, it would just be open for people to play and to take youngsters out, grandkids or kids to a certain age that may not be allowed on other facilities because of their age or ability to be able to mix in with the other golf.
Plus, this is right along the Greenway also. It's certainly more accessible than the VA golf course is. And there'd be facilities close by that people could use. Mr. McFarland?
Well, I was going to say, looking at this, you're exactly right. Sometimes looking at this CIP, it's like looking at a Latin book. Sometimes you have to decipher some of it through. The thing that I think is, and to give you an idea of what the Golf Commission has talked about, the VA, I think, as we've talked about that over the years, especially at the Golf Commission level, that the Golf Commission has made the decision after we've worked and tried to procure long-term leases at the VA, and I think even going back to Mr. Haley, that that it doesn't look like that's something that's going to happen anytime soon. That we made the decision to not put capital investments on a piece of property at the VA that we didn't own, except we did buy a tractor this year that had to replace the one that was, how old was the tractor out there?
It was pushing 20 years old.
So the
Almost an antique.
Yeah, and I do think you brought up a good point. I do think as a golf commission, we have made the point that we would like to see, if possible, some of the teaching taking place out at the VA, and we do have some things go on out there.
Our clinics, some of our junior clinics and things go on out there, but they're very limited on what you're able to do. And the problem is once you get them to a point, and certain ones to a point, from a cost standpoint and an ability standpoint, you can teach them, or you can teach them how to hit a ball, but it's like teaching a kid how to hit a baseball, but he doesn't ever get onto a field. He doesn't ever get to play the game. This is an opportunity to get out and play the game. The $3 million that you're talking about has been in the CIP for golf for quite a few years, but it was for improvements that would hopefully be made at the VA if that ever did work out. The word I guess we've gotten most recently is that that's not going to happen. That's why we've repositioned it, I guess, or renamed it, as opposed to VA improvements as teaching learning facility down the road. But that is not this project. This is something totally separate.
Any other questions or comments regarding the golf?
Well, since it's been explained like that, when I was saying itemize each situation, and we talked about the line of credit, I didn't have that understanding, and I do understand it now. So even though these things are on the list for this year to do, it still has to come to the council to be approved. So I'm okay by not going item by item, if you all are. And as they come up, then we handle the situation then.
Is that your plan, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, sir. But again, as I mentioned, we want to make sure that what we've got in here, if there's any big objection to any of these, we want to make sure we're reading the council right. And you'll have the ability to change your mind later. But if this is the list you're comfortable with, we will proceed to get to work and come back to you as we need to.
All right.
As they come up, I'm saying as these items come up.
As I have read through
Yeah.
most of these, I think I'll just go ahead and try to finish up for the public's benefit, if that's all right. The IT as a master plan implementation, which would set aside about $1 million, a little over $1 million. The police department with radios, renovations, police vehicles, some equipment replacement, and some communications towers would be a little over $9 million total. The Parks and Recreation Department has some improvements at Barfield Crescent, some work at Cannonsburg, bleacher covers, greenway reconstruction, renovations at McFadden, McKnight Park, improvements at Old Fort Park, and some administrative expense along with the work. I know there will be a lot of people at Patterson's Pool who will be tickled to death to know that we're finally going to be able to do something, hopefully, with the dehumidification at the pool, some renovation at Sportscom, Stones River Greenway, Walter Hill renovation, Westview Mini Park, and the West Murfreesboro Park engineering, all totaling about $7.8 million. Mr. McFarland.
Mr. Lyons, I appreciate the recommendation that we had in there after Mr. Goodwin and I were working on bleacher canopies, and by no means did I expect us to include that all in 1 year. So although we have had some issues out at some of the parks that we may need to look at, doing some work on some of our bleachers that we've had some issues with that are 15 or so years old. But this, Ms. Scales, would be an instance where I would want to see what the bids come back at, and then as a council we make a decision on how much, if we want to do it, what we want to do. So I appreciate y'all putting that in there, but by no means did I feel like that would be something that we could handle all in 1 year. But
Well, what we could do with that comment then is when we go to bid it out, give ourselves the ability to mix and match and buy off a la carte menu if we need to.
yeah, we just are putting some variables in that, if what we do for Barfield Park, for Murfreesboro baseball, we need to do for Optimus. At the same time, we need to do that for McKnight Park for the lady softball. So there's a lot of variables to take into account there. So, but I do appreciate the hard work that y'all did on that.
So the total on the Parks and Rec proposed is $7.8 million. As to schools, to do some work at Bradley Academy, to expand Hobgood, and to begin planning for a new elementary school and repaving a parking lot, $7.8 million. Senior center bus and renovation of $141,000. Solid waste, a side loader replacement and a rear loader replacement to a total of $1.3 million. Street department, backhoe and dump trucks to $270 million.
$270,000.
$270,000, that's right, not $270 million. Okay. Rover bus replacements and Rover offices, total of $129,000, and then some miscellaneous transportation, including Bradeville Pike, Joby Jackson, Rucker Lane, Thompson Lane, Smyrna, Sulphur Springs, and Veterans Parkway, to a total of about a little over $11 million. The total is $45,607,000. And let me say also that our staff, each staff is a specialist in what they are doing. We hire professionals in each of those fields, and they bring us things that they feel like will keep Murfreesboro in the leadership position that we are in. We don't have to accept any of them or all of them, but we do have boards and commissions that work with most of these departments that have an opportunity to take a look at those things before we ever get them. And I know in police and fire and rescue we don't, in the street department we don't, and sign department, but in solid waste, those are things that are just virtually service driven. and we get a choice. But on Parks and Rec, we have the Parks and Rec Commission, the airport, we have the Airport Commission, planning, those kinds of things certainly help us get citizen involvement ahead of before it ever gets to the council. So I appreciate the ingenious way, in many ways, that our staff brings us things to do. We don't have to take them all, and we don't look down our noses on you when you bring us good stuff, and we don't look down our noses on you when you don't bring us good stuff. But we are just very pleased that you keep trying to make Murfreesboro first and in that leadership position that we think we have in communities, not only in Tennessee, but in the region. And so don't take any of this personally. It's just we've got to decide if that's what we want to do or we don't want to do it. But we know you have our best interests in mind, and we appreciate what you do as a staff.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Washington.
Right, and I want to commend the staff because, being on the council for 14 years, a lot of these projects and perspectives have been talked about, looked at for years, and finally come to fruition, finally the time to make those moves. Of all that the money spent, council members, we have to spend monies on public safety, communications. You got to do it. It's critical for people's lives and employees' lives to do that kind of work. I'm a little biased to that because I work for a public utility, electric utility. I appreciate the city manager and the rest of you council members supporting the investments, which it'll be huge investments in the towers and the facilities and the upkeep and the maintenance and the upgrades and software that's going to come along with it now. But it has to happen. Rutherford County is in the same situation. I've been talking to the sheriff and different Roger Allen when he was doing his work, bless his heart, as the EMT for the county. Got to happen.
All right. Anything else regarding these recommendations of the city manager? Any other comments? Mr. Young?
Mayor, one of the things that's made Murfreesboro successful and a very vibrant and growing city is the ability for the city managers and the president in the past and the council and the staff to look ahead and say, where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years? Road projects takes 10 years to do a road project. So we have to start and we have to continue on these things. So I think this is a natural progression of good planning from top to bottom. Now, sure, there's things that can be prioritized in and out of this budget, but we only stay in neutral a short period of time. You only go forwards or you go backwards. So I think the strength of this community is the ability for the council and the managers of the department heads to look ahead and say, let's see where we're going to do and let's how we're going to do it. A good example to me is the building of the Medical Center Parkway on the west side of town. If we hadn't have done that, we'd had another Cason Lane over there. But 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, we had to step up and do that. And we've got to buy fire trucks, we've got to buy police communications, those things have been pointed out. But I think that we just need to do this, and if you want a motion, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion.
I have another comment before a motion.
All right.
And I agree that we are growing leaps and bounds, and we also elected to be good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars, my taxpayers' dollars, and sometimes I think we can grow too fast. Not saying we're growing too fast here, but I think I've heard two different things. We have to do this or we have to move on, and then I'm hearing as these projects come up, is this a good time to do it? And do we have the funds? Is it going to be feasible to do it? Because we still live in a city where people are still unemployed, and I'm not kicking any of these projects, but I'm hearing that, like Mr. Lyons said, if you have something, let's talk about it. If not, we're going to go forward. No, we're going forward with the capability to have the monies there, but we're not going forward in doing all these projects.
Yes, ma'am.
But that's it in a nutshell, because I'm hearing two different things. We got to do this. Okay, we need to, if you have a problem tonight, you need to say it. If not, let's move forward. That's not what we're doing. We're just saying we're getting the monies available, but as these projects come up, we may not do them because we still have to be protectors of the taxpayers' dollars.
Correct.
So, because that's why I asked on this, are we going to do all of these things? And I think you said yes, but we're not necessarily going to do all these things.
No, ma'am, what I intended to say was that when we see it in the planning document, staff is going to move forward with the staff. We're going to look to borrow the money, and then staff will do the legwork to bring it back before you for your consideration.
It's more like it.
That's what I want to hear.
Correct.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Young.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and second.
Ready?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. How about beer permits, now that we've gone on to weightier things?
I've got quite a few for you tonight, Mayor. The first one I want to go over with you is actually an existing beer permit. We've got a location on West Main that has a lot beside the restaurant, and they would like to extend the use of the beer permit they currently have to be able to serve on that lot. It's not owned by the same people who own the restaurant, but it is leased by them. And there won't be a fiscal impact on us. We do believe, though, that it would require your approval to allow them to serve from the building onto the lot. And so I do ask permission for that. Do you want me to go on and do the others altogether?
Any questions regarding this amendment of an existing beer permit? Hearing none, why don't you go ahead and do the others?
Okay. We have 3 special event applications tonight. We have one from the Chamber for an event at Nissan at 82812. We have 2 events for Middle Tennessee Medical Center Foundation. One is at 2118 Lovelace Lane on 82812, and the other is going to be around the public square on September 21st, 12. On that one, they would be actually serving inside the actual retail and office spaces. They would not be brought out onto the square. We have a special event put on by Leadership Middle Tennessee. It's going to be held at Bradley Academy on 9/19/12. I have a pending beer application for a current location that is changing its name. It's the same owners at 527 West Main Street. They are very close to passing their building codes inspections, is what I've been told, so I went ahead and sent that tonight. And then I have something else that's a little out of the ordinary. We have a business that is asking for a beer permit for exterior only at another business. This business typically helps them serve for their special events, and they have several they are planning, and so they have approached us about just getting a permit to carry them through the warm months, and then when the warm months are over, they would turn in that permit, and if they decide to do it again next year, they would reapply. I've discussed it with codes. We've went out there and discussed it with the owner of the business as well as the restaurant, and codes is okay with it. It will be completely outside. They will not bring the event in. If there's inclement weather, they will cancel the event. And then I have a convenience store. It's a new location at 2962 South Rutherford Boulevard, Suite H. And I have another convenience store at 2014 East Main Street, which is an ownership change. And all of those last 3 have met codes inspections and our background process. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I feel comfortable in recommending approval of all of these.
All right. Are there any questions of Ms. Wright? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You have before you a list of the statements to be considered for payment. Are there any questions regarding any of the bills of the city for this period of time, or if not, is there a motion that we pay the bills?
I'd move we pay the bills, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman.
Second.
Second, Ms. Harris, thank you. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Board and commission appointments, I have none. Other business from staff or city council to come before the council. Ms. McGannon.
Mayor and council, I have two matters. One that was before you on the table when you came in is your approval of a corrected notice of land use restrictions for Evergreen Cemetery. As indicated in the material that I gave you, the cemetery had agreed to have some restrictions imposed on cemetery property that would be protecting a stream and the stream bank. When the document was entered into, it erroneously applied to the entire cemetery and did not come to either the Planning Commission or the City Council for approval. And what we have before you is your request that you approve the chair of the Cemetery Commission entering into the corrected notice of land use restrictions that would limit those restrictions to the area of the stream and the stream bank. I would be happy to answer any questions about it.
Any questions for Ms. McGannon? If not, is there a motion to accept this recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. And Ms. McGannon?
Mayor, the second matter is the council had previously set three matters for public hearing on September 20th, those being three zoning applications along Memorial Boulevard. There is now a need to change the public hearing date. September 27th seems appropriate. You recall you earlier tonight set public hearings for September 27th, and that would be for the applications to rezone 3240 Memorial from RS-15 to CH, another 9.76 acres at the same street address from RS-15 to RM-16, and approximately 4.5 acres at 3268 Memorial Boulevard from RS-15 to CH. And that is my recommendation.
That's
for those.
moving from September 20th to the 27th?
Yes, for those three public hearings.
All right, council members, you have the option to move the September 20th hearing to September the 27th. What are your wishes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mr. Young, Mr. Gilly, thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, any other business? Thank you, council members, for your work tonight, as usual. I appreciate it, and staff members who stayed, and certainly to the Hopkins who were very patient and stuck it out with us. So good luck on your scouting career. You're adjourned.